Hello friends, I wanted to do a quick video for you that explains some of the criteria you might look for when you're trying to decide what is children's literature. There are a lot of blurred lines when it comes to young adult literature and children's literature and middle grade literature, and so hopefully by the end of this presentation you'll have a clearer idea on how to determine what is a children's book and also why it matters. Here's a top 10 list of describing children's books. It's a pretty good list. I really like this list a lot. I'll just read through them quickly for you. If you're trying to decide if it's a children's book or not, you can tell that children's books have lessons that they teach. They want children to learn correct lessons about life. Number 2, there's usually large, colorful illustrations. The pictures need to be large enough for children to see clearly. Number 3, there's an element of popularity. Number 4, if it's a good children's book, there's an absence of harshness. Number 5, absence of scariness. Number 6, absence of swearing. Number 7, it's short. Number 8, simple vocabulary. Number 9, some children's books are considered good if they're classic, tried and true. And number 10, if there's some familiar content that the children can identify with from their world. So that's taken from a children's literature textbook. And they're defining here what is a good children's book. But I wanted to add my own thoughts from my own experience. Some other general characteristics of what is a children's book could be that the protagonist or main character is a child, while a young adult literature book, the protagonist is usually the age of the reader, so it would be a teenager for young adult literature, which is why Harry Potter is considered a children's book, because when it began, Harry Potter's main character was a child's age. There's also what's called the parent dilemma. In a lot of children's books and in a lot of young adult books also, the parents kind of are invisible or disappear, or they've died, or something has happened to the parent that makes the child have to solve more problems or show more independence or go on their hero's journey alone. So the parent dilemma can be found in children's literature. It's mostly found in young adult literature, and it's definitely an area of controversy among both types of literature, because a child's real world usually has a parent figure, and a parent is not off on their own by themselves. So that's one of the topics that might emerge in this class. Another general characteristic is if it's a fictional children's book, the organization structure for the way it's written is pretty simple. Usually there's a plot, like a beginning, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. If you're in the younger grades, you would just have beginning, middle, end that you would teach children. If it's nonfiction, there's usually 5 typical text structures that are followed in the writing, and I'll give a different presentation about those. But usually the organization of the writing in fiction and nonfiction is more simple at the children's literature level versus the young adult level. There are exceptions to that, which I'll go over in a different presentation, also called metafiction. The books for younger aged readers have a simpler vocabulary, and as the children get older in the chapter books, the vocabulary becomes more complex. And finally, the conflicts that you would see in children's literature is almost always man versus man, while if it's a young adult literature book, the conflicts are usually man versus self. So those are some of my observations to help determine children's books. So I would just like to pose to you, true or false, children's books are easier to write than adult books. The answer is false. Good writing is difficult no matter what the reader's age, and children deserve the best. Picture books are the easiest children's books to write. The answer is false. Children's picture books may be the hardest because they demand conciseness, simplicity, and visual sense. Also, the competition is greater because more people try to write those kind of books. True or false? A children's book writer must first write for magazines. The answer is false. Writing for magazines can teach you a lot, but it's different in some ways from book writing. And though magazine credits may catch a book editor's eye, they won't sell your manuscript. If books are your goal, you might as well jump right in. If you decide to write for children's magazines, as you accumulate the different citations, you would call that a snaps page. And if you accumulate children's book citations, that would just be your book bio. True or false? Children's stories must teach lessons. Well, that thing I just showed you on the slide before said yes, but in reality, good children's stories do not preach. Instead, they educate for life, they teach things, they explore significant themes, just like adult books do, but children usually do not like a moral spelled out to them, and they don't like writing that's preachy. Since my kids, neighbors, or students like my story, it would make a good book. That would be a false characteristic. Usually you're not trying to impress the students or children around you. If you want to get published in the children's book world, you'd have to impress the editors, and the editors are the people you want to enjoy your reading, keeping in mind the child. True or false? Writing in rhyme will give my story more appeal. That's false. Stories in rhyme are especially hard to do well, so editors usually look at books that are written in rhyme skeptically, and they try to avoid them unless it's specifically a poetry genre. And finally, true or false? I must find an illustrator for my picture book. I lost my place, hold on. Oh, that's false. Unless you're the artist yourself and you add words to your own writing, editors will not let you choose your illustrator. And that's a very big misconception. A lot of people want to become children's book authors and they have a friend who illustrates, but in actuality, an editor will match you with someone in their publishing house that they think would be a good fit for you, and often the author never meets the illustrator and the illustrator never meets the author. So if you add someone else's pictures to your text, or if you suggest an illustrator you like, the editor doesn't really like that. And if you're an author, you just focus on the text. So I'm going to let you read through these yourself, but these are some positive things about literature that the Children's Literature Association has come up with. They were trying to figure out, should we keep children's literature in teacher education programs? And they brainstormed all the ways that children's literature adds value for teachers. And so if you are in a teaching degree, these are some things that you would be learning by learning about children's literature. And if you are not in a teaching degree, these are still really important things to help us understand how children's literature can increase knowledge. So scholarship, theories of reading, the range of books, authors, illustrators, selecting good books, appreciation of literary works, visual literacy, responding to different art elements. Having a knowledge of children's literature is important also to identify critical issues, influence of popular culture as a reference tool for evaluating new literature, developing a classroom library if you're a teacher, or a home library if you're a parent, and coming up with strategies for responding to books. So those are reasons why teacher education programs still value learning about children's literature. And for a child, these are some reasons why it's important for them to understand children's literature. You can glance through those yourself, but oh, there's the citation at the bottom. Children's Literature Association values. And I really liked this list because it shows why it's important for children to have a deep understanding of books. So as we go forward in this class, I'd like you to keep in mind 3 things every time you read a book. Every time you decide, I'm going to read this particular book in your hands or online, you'll be thinking of 3 things. Number 1, how would you classify this book for genre, topic, and the age recommendation? And then number 2, using criteria, how would you analyze the book for qualitative elements and quantitative elements? Qualitative elements would be things that would consider it, make it seem like it was a good book. Perhaps the artwork, the themes it brings out, the way a teacher could use it in the classroom to teach reading or other subject areas. So the qualitative elements often are difficult to measure but easy to describe. And quantitatively would be the level of the book, the difficulty of vocabulary, the difficulty of the topic at hand. So you would analyze it those ways. And number 3, every time you read a book, this is the very most important thing you will hopefully learn from this entire class. Always think of the child. How would a child respond to this book? How would their feelings be affected? Would they be able to discuss it? Will they be interested in it? Is it popular? And what kind of tasks might they be able to do or extend from that book in a home situation or a classroom situation? So always, always think of these 3 things every time you read a book. Thanks.